Ukraine is launching a major airstrike on Moscow, Russia's capital, using 600 drones in its largest attack so far. President Zelensky has even said that the situation on the front lines has changed very favorably for Ukraine, shaking up the course of the war. Let's take a closer look at this today. Let's get right into it. First, let's look at the current situation. Currently, Ukraine is continuing its airstrikes on Moscow, the capital of Russia. After Russia's Victory Day event on May 9th, Ukraine began launching full-scale attacks on Moscow. On May 17th, they carried out the largest drone strike in history. This was the first time in Russian history with so many drone attacks. The Russian Ministry of Defense said they shot down 556 Ukrainian drones across Russia. Even Moscow's highly secure air defense network was breached, causing citywide damage. In Moscow alone, 81 drones were intercepted, but because so many drones were sent, the damage was significant. Many high-rise apartments and infrastructure were damaged. It was confirmed that there were many injuries at construction sites near oil and gas refining facilities. The Ukrainian military stated that they struck one refinery and 2 oil facilities near Moscow. Of course, Russia has also carried out airstrikes across various parts of Ukraine. In particular, on May 19th, the Russian military launched a large-scale airstrike in Ukraine's Odessa region. Infrastructure facilities were also damaged. In Izmail, Odessa, which is a strategic point with Ukraine's largest port on the Danube River, this area was heavily targeted. Ukraine appears to have shifted strategy and is now repeatedly striking Moscow because Odessa has been under attack like this. The Ukrainian military is also using drones to keep striking Moscow. This is what Moscow looks like as it gets hit by drone attacks every day. The Ukrainian military realized attacking Moscow would draw Russian focus there, so they launched diversionary operations as well. At the same time as attacking Moscow, they are also targeting Russia's rear oil facilities, aiming to cut off Russia's war funds. Recently, President Zelensky of Ukraine stated that in the past few months, Russia's refining capacity has decreased by 10%, and Russian oil companies are facing the closure of oil wells, which is causing great pain for Russia, as the situation is developing quite unfavorably for them. Russia has also shown signs of threatening the Baltic states. They claim to have received intelligence that Ukrainian drones were deployed in Latvian territory and warned of possible retaliation by Latvia. Latvia and Ukraine have called this fake news, and the United States warned against pressuring NATO members. It seems likely that as Ukraine's drone attacks intensify, this is a strategy to cut off the connection between Ukraine and the Baltic states. It's already been more than 4 years since the war began in 2022. The duration of the war has already surpassed that of the Korean War. In a few months, it is expected to exceed the length of World War I as well. As a result, both sides are suffering tremendous damage. According to a report by the Financial Times, President Xi Jinping of China said during a meeting with US President Donald Trump last week that Putin may eventually come to regret his invasion of Ukraine. As the war continues and damage increases, President Putin may regret his decision, a message President Xi subtly sent to President Trump. Still, it makes sense because the Ukrainian military is widely seen as growing stronger. The war has continued for more than 4 years, and Russia's economic damage is growing as time goes on. It is reported that Russian military casualties have already exceeded 1 million. It is estimated that there are 35,000 casualties every month. Even the Ukrainian military's drones have been continuously upgraded, and now missile and drone strikes are reaching targets as far as 1,600 kilometers away from Ukraine. In the early and middle stages of the war, only Ukraine suffered damage, but now even the Russian mainland is being hit across many areas. President Zelensky of Ukraine has even declared that the battlefield situation is now turning in Ukraine's favor. President Zelensky of Ukraine said in a speech that this month, the tide of war has turned in our favor, meaning in favor of Ukraine. He said, "We are capturing a large number of positions and delivering greater blows." He especially said that the long-term sanctions against Russia have been very effective. He also said that a long-term plan has been approved until June, and in the context, it seems to refer to continued airstrikes and attacks on Russian territory. Currently, the Ukrainian military has significantly changed its tactics and strategy, especially in ground warfare, which appears to have played a major role. Previously, infantry would scout enemy lines before rear units advanced to execute the operation. But now, the Ukrainian military first deploys drones to check the enemy's positions, trenches, inside buildings, and possible routes, and then moves their troops accordingly. And even when attacking the enemy lines, if the enemy's defensive facilities are strong, instead of sending in troops, they now send in robot units first to eliminate the enemies, and then the troops go in just to secure and clear the area. That's the stage they've reached now. So they've changed their ground warfare tactics to use unmanned systems first, followed by manned troops. As a result, the Ukrainian military's casualties have been drastically reduced. By deploying suicide drones as well, they've been able to achieve air superiority even without fighter jets. It's clear why Ukraine is now focusing so heavily on drone, AI, and robotics technology. That's because they'd have no chance if they try to go head-to-head with Russia in a war of attrition. Russia is a much larger country than Ukraine in terms of troop numbers, artillery, missile stockpiles, and tank production capacity. If Ukraine fought like Russia, they'd become more likely to be pushed back over time. That's why Ukraine began shifting toward tech-driven warfare from the early stages of the conflict. They started to massively expand the use of drones and unmanned systems, which can inflict significant damage at a low cost. At the core is Ukraine's defense innovation platform, Brave One, which operates fundamentally differently from traditional national defense systems. Though led by government agencies, it unites private startups, software developers, drone makers, communications engineers, and military units into one system. They connected technology creators directly with soldiers on the battlefield. When a request comes in from the front lines for a certain type of drone, a private development team immediately creates a prototype, and that equipment is deployed to the battlefield to verify its performance. Technology that survives here quickly enters mass production. Brave One also expands extremely rapidly. Initially, only a few hundred startups and development teams joined, but now over 2,000 teams and companies are connected. There are many more small private companies here than traditional large defense contractors. IT companies, drone manufacturing startups, electronics equipment firms, telecommunications technology companies, and even AI software development teams have all become part of the war effort. In particular, Ukraine is accumulating real combat data at an incredibly fast pace. They're collecting real battlefield data on the most effective ways to attack Russian tanks, which communication systems withstand electronic jamming, and the most effective ways to use thermal imaging drones at night. And this data is immediately delivered to civilian development labs. As a result, the speed of drone performance improvement is incredibly fast. The reason this approach is so formidable is that it's a system Russia finds hard to keep up with. Russia still depends on large defense firms whose development approvals and production are slow. Meanwhile, Ukraine operates more like a startup. When a problem arises on the front lines, an updated version is released within days. Ukraine's stronger than expected drone warfare is due to this military-civilian cooperation. There's another point to note. Russia's air defense network's limitations are becoming clear, despite the S-400 once being seen as one of the world's strongest. Known as a powerful air defense system, it could detect aircraft and missiles from hundreds of kilometers away and intercept ballistic missiles. Russia has repeatedly emphasized that the S-400 is the core of its air defense power. However, in the Ukraine war, unexpected problems have continued to occur. The main issue is mass drone attacks. Ukraine is pressuring Russia's air defenses by launching hundreds of suicide and long-range drones simultaneously. These attacks are proving more effective than anticipated. High-performance air defense systems like the S-400 were originally designed to intercept fighter jets, cruise missiles, and ballistic missiles. But when dozens or hundreds of drones, each costing several million to tens of millions of won, arrive simultaneously, the situation changes. Russia ends up in a situation where it has to use air defense missiles worth billions of won to intercept drones that are much cheaper in comparison. In particular, Ukraine is known to use tactics where some drones are sent in first as bait. They reveal Russia's air defense locations with cheap drones, making them use up missiles, then follow with long-range strike drones. When this happens, Russia's air defense missile stockpile quickly shrinks. In fact, even within Russia, there are assessments that the production speed of air defense missiles cannot keep up with the rate of consumption on the battlefield. Moreover, drones are often small and fly at low altitudes, making them difficult to detect in the first place. Air defense systems were designed for fast jets or large missiles, so their efficiency drops when dozens of small drones attack from different directions at once. One of the reasons why Moscow is repeatedly being attacked by drones right now is exactly because of this. Even though Russia has a strong air defense network, it is unable to perfectly intercept all the drones. This is putting significant pressure on the Russian military. Ukraine has been able to continuously put pressure on Russian territory at a relatively low cost, while on the other hand, Russia has entered a situation where it has to keep using much more expensive air defense assets and missiles. Analysis also suggests that the longer the war lasts, the more these cost differences will add up.